Alright everyone out there in Banjo land, Mike Heading here. I've got a little mini banjo lesson for you today. I want to show you a 3-step process I use to improve my practice. So I apply this to any new licks I'm working on. I write up a lot of new tabs that I have to learn quickly, so I use this when I'm learning a new tab. It's a really simple 3-step process you can use to improve your practice, okay? So remember, we've got our picking hand and we've got our fretting hand. So it doesn't matter if you're playing right-handed or left-handed, right? Picking hand, fretting hand. So step 1 is we're going to separate the two hands. We're going to separate the two hands. Step 2, we're going to practice each hand on its own. Step 3, we're going to combine the hands back together, okay? So that's what we're going to do for this process. So I've talked about this in some of my other lessons about separating the two hands, but I still get a lot of questions from students, and I ask them if they're doing this process, and they almost never are. So I thought it'd be good to film a standalone video on this topic. All right, so let's jump into it. So let's start with some really basic licks, and I'll show you how to do this, and then we'll get more advanced from there, okay? So let's take like just a basic slide lick and a classic Scruggs lick and a pinch. So something like this. Okay, so one more tip we want to remember is that I found with most students, including me, the majority of the problems, if you can't play a particular passage, are going to come from your picking hand, not your fretting hand. Doesn't mean it's never going to be your fretting hand, but I want you to think that phrase, the majority of my problems are probably coming from my picking hand, not my fretting hand. I really want you to remember that in this lesson. That's going to be really, really important. So let's play that lick one more time. Okay, so step 1, like I said, we're going to separate the two hands. And since I just said the majority of the problems are going to come from my picking hand, let's focus on the right hand first. So first thing we need to do is, I say to my students, and this is how I think about it, you have to pretend that all the notes are 0. So open string. So what would that lick look like if you were just playing the right hand only? And sometimes this is hard for students to conceptualize, but once you get the hang of it, it'll make sense. So what we're doing here is we're separating left hand ornaments like slides and hammer-ons from right hand picking moves that we need to do, right? So it's very important that we separate the two hands. That's going to be step 1, like I said. So let's compare that lick with what it would be with just the right hand only, okay? So let's look at just the right hand only. It would be... Remember, you forget all the slides, the hammer-ons, and the fretted notes, right? You just play them all as zeros, as open. Also very important is why I always list the TIM, thumb, index, middle, below the tab, right? So you can always refer to that as well if you're in doubt about figuring out what just the right hand is. Remember, slides, hammer-ons are all left-hand techniques, bends, right? Those don't change the right hand at all. That's really important to remember. Okay, so step 1, like I said, we separate the two hands. So visualize in your mind how that lick would look if you're just playing just the right hand. And this is what I call pulling the curtain back, where you're really going to see what you've got. If that doesn't sound confident when you're playing just the right hand on its own, there's no way adding the left hand is going to make it sound better. You might be able to kind of cover your mistakes, but that underlying groove that's not there with that right hand is going to kind of come out. You're going to lose the timing of the lick, or something's not going to sound quite right. So that's why we always want to separate the two hands first, focus on the picking hand, make sure that's really solid. So play the phrase as many times as you need to, play it faster, play it slower, whatever you need to do. Play it really slow. If I'm practicing, I'm watching my right hand, making sure I have good form, I'm getting good tone on all the notes. Like I said, the left hand can really cover up the mistakes of the right hand. And like I said, this is why I call this pulling the curtain back. You really see what you've got. You want all those notes to stand out loud and proud. You want them to be confident. You don't want there to be any incorrect breaks in the timing, right? Okay? So that's step one. Like I said, we're going to separate the two hands, focus on the picking hand first. The left hand's a little bit harder to practice on its own, but what I want you to think about when you're practicing the left hand on its own is picking which left hand fingers you're going to use, making sure the angle of your wrist is correct, and then making sure you're not flying your fingers way off the fretboard. So if I was practicing the left hand of this lick on its own, I'm going to pick that I'm going to do that slide every time with my middle finger, right? So at the beginning, I'm going to do that 2 to 5 slide this time with my middle finger. I'm going to make sure when I play that lick, I'm going to do it with the same finger every time. It's going to help me build my muscle memory. And then I'm going to do that hammer on with my index and middle finger. If you like to use your middle finger and third finger, that's fine too. But what you're doing in that practice is you're practicing the moves that you're going to do, right? So I'm not even playing it all with my right hand, but I'm just practicing that slide. I'm practicing doing that hammer on, and then I come back down and land on the second fret with my middle finger. And I'm watching how far my hand goes away. I'm making sure I don't start way up here, so then I have to come way down, right? I'm kind of working on that left hand efficiency. And in practice, you probably won't have to do that much once you get it down, that you get used to using certain fingers for certain licks. But you just want to take that time and make sure you're going through that process of like, am I using the best finger to play that? A lot of students get tripped up in this stage because they use a bad finger. They might slide with their third finger or something that kind of puts them out of position. So the practicing the fretting hand stage, like I said, might not take you quite as long. But like I said, you're just you're making sure you don't have a weird wrist angle. Because remember, when you start adding too many elements, like you start adding the right hand, you might not notice that your left hand's at this weird angle. Where if you're just working on the left hand on its own, it's like, okay, that looks a little weird when you're practicing on its own and you're not focusing on your right hand. You can start to identify some of those little things that are going to make your playing less efficient, right? So that's what I'm doing in that step. I'm practicing that. And then lastly, step 3 is we combine them back together. And if it's still not sounding good, then I go back through the process again. I come back to step 1. Maybe I just need to loop this more. Check my left hand, make sure it's correct, right? And then I combine them back. So let's take another lick that might throw off like more of a beginner level player because you have the right hand. So something like this. So let's look at the right hand only. Remember, slides, pull-offs, or hammer-ons are all left hand moves. So the right hand on its own is this. So like I said, I break it down right hand only. Left hand is pretty easy on this one. I'm just sliding with one finger twice, and then I bring my index finger back down, I put it there, and I do a little pull off, and then I just hammer it right back. I take it off for a second, and then I hammer back down. So I do a slide twice, pull off, and then I hammer back down. So that's what I'm doing with my left hand. Add them back together. Notice how at the beginning of measure 8, right, that pull-off is a 16th note. Students might get really overly concerned about that, of getting that pull-off to happen right before, right, which is good practice. But again, if you look back to the right hand's actually not doing anything different there. Which would be measure 11 of the tab if you're referring to the tab, right? So look at measure 8 with the left hand. You see how that 3 and 2 are connected with that little double bar below the tab, but you want to remember that that's a left hand move, not a right hand move. That throws off so many players because they think that they have to do something different with their right hand there. But that's not affecting the right hand actually at all. The right hand is just doing eighth notes. That's why separating the two hands is so important. You realize that that little pull-off actually doesn't affect the timing at all. So it actually gives you more freedom to either play that correctly, or if you botch it a little bit, the right hand hopefully won't get thrown off because you practice them on its own. So one more time. Also that lick, like that little hammer-on at the end of measure 8, where you're doing that with your index finger of your right hand instead of your thumb, where you might have done it more if you're a beginner. So practicing that roll on its own is very important. So I'm going thumb, index, middle, thumb, index. If you don't practice the right hand on its own of that lick, a lot of times your thumb of your right hand will just come down and try and do that hammer on because that's how you've practiced it in the past, but you didn't break down the two parts. That was something I definitely struggled with, and separating the two hands, again, like I said, makes that lick come to life and you get through it. Okay? Let's look at another more advanced lick, like a double hammer-on pull-off lick, something like this. Classic lick. You see those hammer-ons and pull-offs, and it's like, how do I play through that? How do we get through that, right? So what we're going to do is, again, separate the two hands. So right hand only would be this. Definitely not as scary when you take away the left hand on this lick. It is syncopated, so it's 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So I would get that down as many times as you need to, and then add the left hand would be, again, we start on this 2nd fret down here at the beginning of the lick, and then we go, so you hammer on, and then you hammer on and pull off. And then you go back down to the 2nd fret here. So I'm starting here, and then I'm going up like that, and hammering on and pulling off, and then coming right back down to where I started, essentially. So we have... Go faster. Right hand only. Left hand. Like I said, I apply this to all my licks. If it's a longer phrase, if I'm playing through a whole tab, I'll do this same thing. Let's take another lick that might throw off a lot of people, like something like this. Same idea. So right hand only is going to be... So 1, 2, and 4, 1, and 4, and. Left hand is just doing this hammer-on back and forth. 4 times, excuse me, and actually 5 times, and then you hammer on and pull off at the end. So it's... And then a pull off at the end. So... Add them back together. So 1 and 2 and. Take another lick like this. This lick definitely has more left hand moves, right? Same thing, do right hand only. Maybe you need to practice measure 29 at the tab on its own. That's a little tricky. Into measure 30. What's your left hand doing, right? You're hammering on, and then you're grabbing up here on the 1st fret, and then you're doing pull-offs with your ring finger, or you're putting your ring finger on and then you're pulling it off, right? So you have. So. Let's take a lick in C, something like this, right? So that with right hand on its own would be. Left hand would be, you're in C here. So I've got my index finger and third finger, right? Then I'm sliding my middle finger up to the 5th fret with my ring finger, right? So I'm going from this shape here, this C, to this C bar chord here. And what I'm practicing there is using the same 2 fingers every time, right? Making sure I don't fly off either direction. And I can just practice that slide as many times as I need to. So I'm starting here and I'm just sliding up and then coming back down, like that. Take that finger off and then come back down. And then add them back together. Do this with any type of lick. Like, let's take a more advanced, like backup lick, like something like this. Right hand only would be. Left hand on that one's definitely a little trickier, right? I'm going from this D shape here to this D shape, and then up to this D bar, but I'm really just using my top 2 fingers, right? So I'll do strums with my right hand just so you can hear it, so it'll make it more sense when I'm practicing it. So I'm going from this D to this D shape here to this, essentially this D bar chord up here, right? But I'm just using the top 2 fingers. So I'm going sliding up, landing here, and then sliding up with that finger, and then sliding into that, and then sliding actually back down to this shape. So I'm just working through those 3 shapes and then back down. And just adding that little slide in between. Take another like single string lick like this. Or would the right hand be there? Left hand would just be, you're working this D, 3, 4, and you got your first finger down. And then back up to this high D. So you're just working that shape. So you get the idea, but again, I'm applying that same 3-step process to all these licks. Last one. Classic backup lick. Right hand only would be. Left hand, you're not doing much there. You're just moving this third finger back and forth, right? So you start here with your D down, you go land here, 4th fret, 3rd string, then down there, and then move your ring finger down, and then back up, and then back down. So that's all I'm doing with my left hand, just moving that one finger. The other fingers are staying down the entire time, and add them back. So like I said, this is a really great 3-step process that I use to practice all my licks, practice all my tabs. Really, whatever I'm working on, I apply this same thing. I keep reiterating that, but it's so powerful to be able to visually see the tab or whatever you're working on as 2 separate things. The fretting hand and the picking hand, right? Obviously, most people would be the picking hand's the right hand, the fretting hand's the left hand, but whatever, if you're playing left-handed or right hand, the same concept apply, right? So separate the 2 hands. The majority of your problems are probably coming from your picking hand. Separate the 2 hands, work on the picking hand first, the fretting hand second. practice them each on their own, and then step 3, combine them back together. All right, hopefully this helps you get through your next difficult passage you're working on. Good luck and keep picking. You got this.